What's up, everybody? Newman back. Welcome to the 27th episode of Godzilla-Thon. This one is for Godzilla 2000. Yeah, well, I mean, sort of. This is also Godzilla Millenium. If you're going off the Japanese title, technically, it shouldn't even be called Godzilla 2000. It should be called Godzilla 1999, because that's the year it came out. But today we're going to be doing the review for the first of the Millennium era Godzilla movies, that being the popular title, Godzilla 2000. This will be for the English dub because I didn't realize that the Japanese cut isn't even on the DVD that I have. I don't know what DVD I have. I'm looking at the case, looking for some distributor. I don't know. It's a TriStar DVD. I don't know why it'd come with a French version, but not a Japanese version. And that annoys me. I really was curious to see the Japanese version. Everyone who's seen it has told me, oh man, it's so much worse than the English cut. And it's like, I really want to see why. I want to see what's so bad about it. I mean, I don't like the English cut all that much. I don't hate it. I'm kind of neutral on it, except, I don't know. I probably lean towards more of disliking it than I lean towards liking it. And I know a lot of people love this movie. This was a lot of people's first Godzilla movie. I grew up with this movie in a sense. I mean, I used to watch it a lot as a little kid, but I didn't watch it a lot as a young enough kid to, like, have fond memories of it. I watched it at an era where it's just, like, to the point where I can hardly even remember watching it, but I definitely remember playing with this toy car. I had a yellow Jeep toy, and I used to play with it like it was the Godzilla Prevention Network, and I used to, like, drive it up dirt and like chase around my Godzilla toys with it. I had a really cool Godzilla 2000, I don't know what kind of toy he was. He was like rubberish and clear. I still have him. He's clear, like completely yellow and clear. I don't know. I used to chase him around with that Godzilla Prevention car that I used to have. I mean, I have memories of liking this movie. Just, I haven't watched this movie in such a long time. Going back to it, I didn't really enjoy it, but I don't even know what I'm talking about. I forgot what I even started talking about. The Japanese cut. The Japanese cut's worse, and I don't know how that could be because I don't love this version. So I'm interested to see why it's so much worse than this version. That's really the gist of what I tried to say and got sidetracked. Also, the DVD art on my Godzilla 2000 DVDs, I have 3 DVDs of Godzilla 2000, all of them the same. The DVD art is phenomenal. I mean, it is. It's a lot cooler than the movie, that's for sure. Godzilla's design looks cooler than he does in the movie, too. Although his tail's like 13 miles long in the poster, I just realized that. And he's probably a couple thousand feet tall. But who cares? It looks awesome. Okay, so this movie, I don't really know what to make of it. It's not an event film, that's for sure. You have the original movie, go through Destroy All Monsters is an event film. That is the ending. It is a big event. Alright, Terror of Mechagodzilla is not a big event film because they just ended it abruptly. They didn't have the plan to end it with that movie. That's just how things wound up. So that one couldn't have been a big event film. You have 1985, which feels like, or 1984, which feels like a big event film in my opinion. And then you have Godzilla vs. Destroy, which is like the biggest event Godzilla movie to date. Now, you have this film come along, and I'm excluding the 98 version because it doesn't follow a continuity. Like, it doesn't stick to the 1954 continuity, so I'm not going to talk about 98 here because of that reason, not because I don't like the movie or whatever. This movie, it's a sequel to the original 1954 movie, but it does not feel like a big event. Like, nothing in this movie makes you be like, oh man, Godzilla's back and things are going down. It just feels, run-of-the-mill, same thing we've seen over and over again. It just doesn't feel that special in my opinion. Now, one of the things that strikes me about this movie, about the English cut specifically, is there is no real defined continuity. You don't know where this movie takes place. For all we know, this is the continuation of the Showa era. This is what happens after Terror of Mechagodzilla. Godzilla gets mutated even further than he was in those old Showa movies, winds up the creature that we see him as in this movie. That's a possibility. I think the official canon for this movie is that it is a direct sequel to the 1954 Godzilla, excluding all other Godzilla movies. That's the one we're supposed to go with this movie. I know that. I'm just saying that in this movie itself, there's nothing that clearly defines the status quo or continuity of the series. Whereas previously, 1985, very, very clear that they were excluding all of other movies other than the 1954 one. So this one I just don't think does a good enough job telling us where we are in some sort of universe. It just starts us right out without, letting us know what's going on. I do really like the idea of a storm chasers for Godzilla. It's something that I've always thought was really interesting. It kind of reminds me of in the Heisei era how we had a lot of real world stuff going on towards the beginning of the Heisei era, with a lot of the political stuff and everything going on there. So I do like the fact that now in this movie, in this new Millennium era, we are picking back up with the trend of having very real world situations in a Godzilla movie. And storm chasers, although they are crazy people in real life, they're real, they exist. So I really like the idea that it's implemented into the Godzilla series, and we never see anything quite like it again. They explain that they can track where Godzilla is by watching for plasma spikes on a monitor to alert them where Godzilla is when he's nearby and so on, so they can predict where he's going to make landfall, let people know, and then they can prevent death by having people evacuate. They don't do a great job because Godzilla immediately makes landfall in this movie and they don't let anyone know. This movie starts out with some great scale. There's an incredible shot of a man sitting inside of a lighthouse, and he looks outside the window, and you just see a boat moving past the window, and he's freaking out. He's like, how could that even be possible? And then Godzilla moves past, and the boat's in his mouth. Why the boat's in his mouth, I don't know. They don't ever explain it. It doesn't really seem like he needed to eat anything on it, but I guess it's just because it's a cool shot. Godzilla walks, out. He's hidden in the fog the whole time. They do a great job building up to his reveal. Like I said, this movie has some amazing scale, which is really funny because this Godzilla is not that big. He is Showa height. I think he's back down to 50 meters from 100. He is half the size he was in the Heisei era, and it still does a better job making you feel how huge he is in this movie than it ever did in the Heisei series, which is something that I love they improved upon. That is one of the few things that I think they improved upon. Godzilla's new design. That is something that I do not think they improved upon. A lot of people love this design. When I was a kid, I loved this design. I really thought the spiky things on his neck. He has like this clear portion on his neck where it's all smooth, and then he has these spikes sticking off each side of his neck that opens up to the scales all across his body, and his body starts really, really scaled and deep, like the cuts between the scales, the crevices, really deep, and the further down the body you go, you lose a lot of that detail, and he becomes more like smoothed out until you hit the legs, and each leg is very deep cut. It's a very intricate, interesting looking design. Personally, I'm just not a big fan of it. I've never thought that the spiky dorsal fins were all that cool. I think that the dorsal fins in Godzilla 2000 are much longer than they ever should be. They're like incredibly long, stick so far off his back. I just don't like the design all that much. I think he looks cool. I do. I get why people like this design. It's just not Godzilla to me. Godzilla to me, very smooth. You can even have him not be smooth. He doesn't have to be smooth. Just Godzilla to me is the maple leaf dorsal fins, Heisei design, or if you're going to go with something more jagged, I want something more like the 54 design, which was very roughed up but not super sharp. I like the idea that he's been withered away, not that he's been turned into like this super sharp, kind of agile fighting machine. I don't really find that as interesting. I mean, it works in some movies, Final Wars, not this movie in my opinion. I just don't think it looks good compared to some of the other designs, and I just don't think it holds up very well. That being said, it is cool and serviceable for the movie. Next movie, however, they take the same design and give it a new paint job. Oof. I don't even want to talk about that now. I hate it. This Godzilla, though, He is greener than he's really ever been before. Godzilla Jr. doesn't count in the Heisei era. He was straight up green, but he wasn't Godzilla. This Godzilla is greener than any Godzilla we've ever seen, and his dorsal fins have hints of purple, something that they're going to take to an extreme next movie and really, really turn me off to this design. That actually might be, now that I think about it, why I dislike this design as much as I do, is because of how it's presented next movie. And I know that's kind of unfair for me to judge this without, like, judge this on its own, comparing it to the next movie or with the next movie information in my head. I don't know. It is unfair, I get it, but you know what? It's my review. I can do whatever I want. I do really like the way they keep Godzilla hidden, though. It reminds me a lot of his reveal in 1984 when he comes out of the fog. It's just great suspense. They do a really good job building up suspense, and I find that very intriguing. So the Godzilla Prevention Network gets a little too close for comfort, and one of the girls snaps some pictures in Godzilla's face, makes him real angry. They just got too close for comfort, I guess. He doesn't like him, so he tries to kill him, which is kind of weird because we see him standing in front of this tunnel. He's smacking his hand down, trying to grab at him, and then all of a sudden his foot just starts coming down through the tunnel, and you're like, well, how did he get from point A to point B that quickly? He's a giant 100-foot dinosaur. He cannot just scale a mountain like that. Like, he doesn't have that kind of flexibility or range. Whatever, it makes for a cool shot, despite the fact that every time I've watched this movie, even as a little kid, I've had questions as to why the dad, when reversing out of the tunnel, reverses straight into a wall and then just stays there pressed against the wall. I don't know how that could be. You know, he just must suck at driving. That's all I'm going to say about that. Godzilla's got a new roar this movie. It's a very deep, angry version of his regular roar. He also uses some of the 98 roars in here whenever he's getting hurt. The roar is cool. They use it throughout all the Heisei, or the Millennium movies, I mean. They use it throughout all the Millennium movies. It's just, it doesn't have that classic Godzilla feel to me, and that's something that this movie really lacks, in my opinion. I know this movie is a throwback to the Showa films, and I love the Showa films, but it's not a Showa film. I don't think it works as well as they wanted it to. Anyways, the roar, it's cool. In some movies, I don't think it's as cool as Godzilla's normal roars, or even the Heisei roar. I loved his roar throughout the Heisei era, minus the 84 roar. Although I do think that one's really cool, I don't think it works with any Godzilla but that Godzilla and Shin Godzilla, so I'm glad they didn't keep using it throughout all the movies. I'm glad they went back to a much more classic roar throughout the rest of the movies, although that Heisei roar, probably the standard one, is my favorite roar of all time. You know, the Showa roar is great and everything. It just might be a little too whiny now that I think about it, like too high-pitched, whereas the Heisei was just perfect. This one's too deep and grungy for me. Like, it's too bass-heavy, I guess. I don't know what I want to say. You guys, I feel like it's really hard for me to articulate my thoughts on why I don't like the sound design of his roar. I had the same problem talking about why I had the problems with the sound design for Godzilla's Atomic Breath and Godzilla vs. Mothra from the 90s, so, you know, I guess I'm just not great at talking about sound design. There is some great integration and interaction between the humans and the monsters in this movie. There's a lot of really impressive shots of people in cars or jets or on foot in front of the monsters in the background, but both are moving simultaneously and the camera's moving at the same exact time, so you have three major things moving at once, and all the shots generally look pretty convincing. They do last a little too long, and the effect is ruined when sometimes you see Godzilla shaking in the distance, like they didn't insert him properly into one place. So the effect does get ruined when the shots linger too long, but generally they look amazing. We just randomly cut to this meteor that's being investigated underwater. I don't know why we had to cut to it during the middle of a destruction scene with Godzilla, but we do. It's just a big rock meteor under the water. Real cool. There's some very reminiscent shots of the 1954 Godzilla's attack during this Godzilla's attack at the start of this movie. It's very cool. And it kind of feels like this whole opening scene with Godzilla destroying the city is Toho showing off their special effects, showing off how far they've come from the early 90s, and showing off how much better at special effects with giant monsters they are than America, who just previously released Godzilla 1998 the year before. So the meteor is studied underwater. It's either I couldn't figure this scene out. No matter how many times I watch this movie, I never understand what's happening. Either the meteor is sprouting underwater volcanoes, or there's underwater volcanoes all around the meteor. Either way, they say it's like a underwater volcano ocean or something stupid like that. I don't know. That's another shot that always lasted with me. That's like a thing that stuck with me as a little kid, was those underwater volcanoes. And there was a mall when I was a little kid that used to have these big balloons, like these big they were like parachutes almost, and then they'd blast water around them or something. I mean, I'm a really little kid, so my memory of it is definitely not accurate. But as a little kid, every time I'd see this fountain, it was like a big fountain spraying up, and there were these balloons at the fountain. Every time I saw that fountain, I was reminded of this movie, reminded of the underwater volcanoes from the fountain, reminded the balloons looked identical to the balloons that they used to pull the meteor out of the water later on in the movie. So I don't know. That's just something that's always stuck with me. It's a shot that every time I see just kind of takes me back to being a child, but to a point in my childhood where I was so young that I can't pinpoint the memory. Like, it's one of those where you can't quite remember what happened, but you remember something vaguely like that happened. So it's just kind of one of those interesting things for me. I really like the idea that Godzilla's radiation ruins camera film when you get too close to him. However, just like the 98 movie, they never do anything very interesting with the radiation aspect of Godzilla. I've said many times, if I were to direct a Godzilla movie which fingers crossed someday hopefully I will be able to, I do plan on making it the most dark horror movie, realistic tone that I can. And by realistic, I mean real to the point where Honda wanted it to be in the 1954 movie, not real to the point where, they thought they were going to try and take it with the 98 movie. That kind of horror tone that they had with the 54 movie, that's the kind of thing I want to go for. Something that I'd play around a lot with is the radiation aspect of Godzilla, because I feel like all these movies that bring it up have great concepts, but they never do anything interesting with them. They just bring them up and then leave them on the surface. I've been still waiting for a movie to do something very concretely interesting with this idea other than the 1954 movie. There's a lot of odd slapstick throughout this movie. I'm just going to say now, I don't like it. I don't find it funny. I'm not a big fan of slapstick comedy, so I'm just gonna move on. I guess Always Sunny in Philadelphia is kind of an exception to that rule, but that's not really slapstick. They don't really go to the extent that they do in this movie, where it's like a dude hitting another dude in the head with the wood pole. It's real funny, and he's gonna get hit in the head with the wood pole a couple more times, and it's just gonna be it's just the kooky neighbors. It's real funny. I don't, it doesn't do anything for me. I just find it dumb. Now the meteor is pulled to the surface of the water. This is what I was talking about with those balloons. Suddenly, when it's being pulled up to the surface by these balloons, it just shoots towards the surface, pops all the balloons, just heads straight towards the surface of the water. They're all like, whoa, it has consciousness, which my personal reaction would have been like, oh man, it must have been weighed down by something down there. It must have been like attached to the rocks below it or something, and then it's kind of hollow inside. So once we broke it off the rocks, it just naturally lifted to the top of the ocean. But somehow they make the leap to, no, this thing's an alien. It's from space, which, that's probably like the last place I'd go with it. But they get there pretty quickly in this movie. They just come to that conclusion very quickly. Yuki, she is our reporter girl of the movie, is called in by, I spelled his name wrong here, so I'm going to be pronouncing it wrong until I see it written later. His name is Shinoda. His name is Shinoda. All right, I wrote his either first or last name like Misaru or something like that. I can't quite tell what I wrote there. So Yuki's called by Shinoda to see Godzilla make landfall. Katagiri, the bad guy of the movie, shuts down nuclear reactors in the area where Godzilla is presumably landing. The idea in this movie is that Godzilla comes on land to attack energy sources, and he just kind of has this vendetta against human energy. He hates all electricity and all nuclear energy, which is interesting, but again, they don't do anything crazy interesting with it. The meteor rises vertically into the water, and it just kind of faces the sun. The army prepares a big, huge attack on Godzilla. New missiles will be developed against Godzilla that can pierce any surface. Godzilla surfaces and is attacked by the military. Godzilla is badly hurt by these missiles. There's a really cool scene. It does last a little too long, but there's a cool scene of Godzilla walking up onto land, and they're just shooting these missiles into his chest, and every time one hits his chest, skin and just blood and chunks are just flying everywhere. Like, this is doing some damage to Godzilla. And this really, like, when a lot of people complain and they're like, I can't believe Shin Godzilla bleeds, it's like, this movie shows flat out, like, this is a previous Godzilla movie. There's precedent in the past for Godzilla to be badly injured by the military to the point of bleeding. Case in point, this movie. However, the distinct difference between this movie and Shin Godzilla, the one that they have against Godzilla 98, is that in both these movies, Godzilla and Shin Godzilla, neither time does Godzilla die. In Godzilla 1998, Godzilla does die. So Godzilla Millenium and Shin Godzilla do have that leg up on 98, even though all three movies do feature Godzilla bleeding after being attacked by the military. Also, both movies, which is Godzilla Millennium and Shin Godzilla, have a valid excuse for why Godzilla would be bleeding as a result of the military, whereas 98's excuse is realism. Who cares about realism? It's a giant monster movie. So like I said, it's revealed that the meteor is attracted to the sun, and it starts scanning for DNA, like the best DNA that it can take up the form of to inhabit Earth. It flies away. The UFO intercepts Godzilla. The UFO attacks Godzilla. It has this like beam that shoots out of a hole in it. Godzilla's firing off his atomic breath. He has a new version of the atomic breath, which is a red atomic breath similar to the Heisei era. However, it's more fiery and crackly compared to what we're used to. And it also produces much more heat than we've seen before, if we can tell, based off the way it's presented in this movie and based off the way his dorsal fins are. Godzilla is blasted into the ocean and has to retreat because he's so hurt by this big spaceship. And then the spaceship flies away because Godzilla shot it up with the atomic breath. There's some great stuff with Godzilla's footprints on the beach, and by great stuff, I mean really impressive shots of this dude, Shinoda, riding his motorcycle around. The massive scale of Godzilla's footsteps on the beach, that they were actually there, real footprints in the beach that they put there. Looks really cool the way he's investigating them. It was a great scene. The big rock meteor starts to evolve into a metallic silver UFO. The rock goes still, and the military tries to contain it. They find out it's powered by light. Shinoda and Yuki ask Katagiri to help study Godzilla's skin. The UFO hacks Yuki's laptop to find information about Godzilla, which is one of the most interesting ideas of this movie. The fact that the enemy of this movie, the bad guy, the other kaiju, interacts with the humans in this way, where it hacks our technology to find out about its opponent, shows a great level of intelligence that we've never seen with a monster Godzilla's fought before. It's very interesting. It is discovered Godzilla has a super quick healing factor in this continuity. People often get this confused with every continuity. In this continuity alone, it's revealed Godzilla has a super fast healing factor that goes beyond all other creatures known to man. It's soon called Regenerator G1, similar to the way that Wolverine's skin regenerates. I think it does take Godzilla a little bit longer than Wolverine. Orga has that kind of on-the-spot rapid heal factor later on in the movie when he takes some of the Regenerator G1, but standard Godzilla does not have this. This is just this continuity, and I don't know if it happens in the next movie as well, where he has the same regenerative properties, but usually Godzilla will sustain an injury and he'll have to heal at a normal rate, or he's just so thick-skinned that he doesn't sustain the injury at all. So the meteor is dormant during the night. Shinoda used to work for Katagiri, we find out, or used to work with them, but they left. They parted ways because Shinoda felt that they were doing research for quote-unquote all the wrong reasons, aka Katagiri wants to kill Godzilla, which doesn't make him a bad guy. However, later on in the movie, he does prove himself to be a bad guy, trying to kill Shinoda, trying to blow him up. I don't know where that comes from. It's a real forced villain plot, if I have to say so. It's really forced. It comes out of nowhere. I don't like the conflict. It's boring. I don't like these human characters. The UFO evolves out of a rock and into that giant silver, sleek shape that I was talking about, and it flies away. The UFO starts blowing up helicopters. It lands on a news station. The CGI in this movie, I want to mention now because the UFO is all CGI for the most part, doesn't look that good. It's not impressive at all. There's a lot of CGI in this movie that just falls flat. However, all the suitmation stuff looks incredible. All the miniatures look incredible. There's a real weird shot of Godzilla swimming under the ocean in this movie that looks straight pulled out of Godzilla Unleashed, the video game for the Wii. Just real bad special effects in this movie when it comes to CGI. Glad that they didn't use too much of it. I don't know what the shot of Godzilla was necessary for either. It just looks real bad. So people gather around the building to watch the UFO. It's kind of a nod to Independence Day, which kind of feels like an FU to Independence Day because that was made by Roland Emmerich. Roland Emmerich ruined Godzilla the year before, and it kind of feels like Toho is like, hey, you wanted to rip off other movies, we're going to rip off your movie, and then we're just going to make a good Godzilla movie, which is something you failed to do in the first place. I don't know, that's just the way I interpret it. The army plans to blow up the UFO at night. Yuki's laptop and all other computers in the Shinjuku area are hacked by the UFO. It is researching humanity and especially Godzilla. Katagiri orders the building that the UFO landed on to be blown up, but Yuki is still inside. She's trying to shut down the hacking before the UFO finds all the information it's looking for, or at the very least, she's trying to understand what it's looking for. Shinoda stays. Shinoda and his daughter run into the building to try and stop Yuki. So Shinoda stays behind to find out what the hacking's all about. Katagiri blows up the building with Shinoda still inside. The top of the building explodes, but the rest of it stays intact. So you're like, oh yeah, he's totally fine. And then all of a sudden, the UFO blows up the rest of the building, and Shinoda's dead. No, I'm just kidding. He's fine. The building does blow up, though. It's a huge explosion. It's kind of a recreation of some of the shots from Independence Day. Very cool stuff. It just visually looks cool. I'm not sure about the science of someone, riding down an elevator shaft being faster than an exploding UFO blast thing on a building. But, it happens, and he's okay. So the UFO plans to turn Earth into its own planet by taking Godzilla's form. Godzilla makes landfall. Godzilla heads for the ship. And by the ship, I mean the UFO. There's great effects in this movie, I keep mentioning that, but there's too much motion blur and a little bit too much green screen here and there. There's a lot of Godzilla in real cities, which is something I talked a lot about with the Godzilla vs. Destroyer review. Godzilla in real world cities. However, this movie does a nice integration of actual miniatures, so we see Godzilla destroying the buildings that he's walking through. We cut for a couple, 30 seconds to him walking through a real-life city, cutting back to the miniatures to see some destruction. It never feels like you're just watching the cities like you were in Godzilla vs. Destroyer. It is a very nice blend of the two methods. The alien wraps up Godzilla in these tentacles that it shoots out from the ground, taking some of his DNA and his regenerator G1. Godzilla hits the UFO with the atomic breath. His dorsal fins, They light up and they start producing heat in this movie. That's one very cool aspect, and the crackling sound that it makes is really interesting and very original and cool. And I love the way that Godzilla is so hot based off his dorsal fins and his atomic breath inside of his mouth that it melts the tentacles that are touching his body. Really cool. And then Godzilla unleashes the atomic breath. I don't know where this one ranks on the power scale. I wouldn't say this atomic breath is stronger than the Heisei red atomic breath, but I would say it's up there. It's definitely stronger than anything from the Showa era, probably anything from the Heisei era minus the red atomic breath. It's probably equally as strong as Shin Godzilla's breath, if I had to guess where Shin Godzilla's breath ranked. This one just seems incredibly powerful. So the UFO scans Godzilla's DNA again, like I said. This is where it takes more regenerator G1. The UFO uses telekinesis to beat up Godzilla before evolving into a UFO-headed tentacle monster. Then it falls over and dies. It accidentally wakes up the knocked out Godzilla. and turns into the kaiju known as Orga. It's never called Orga in this movie, however, we do know from the video games, officially licensed comics, and toys that this monster is called Orga, so I will be referring to him as Orga for the rest of the review. Godzilla destroys the UFO. There's a huge, like a very physical punching fight, really great physical combat in this movie. We have not seen that since we haven't seen that since the Showa era. We have not seen great physical fights in a Godzilla movie since the Showa era, so it's great to see Godzilla and Orga beating each other up. Orga does a lot of punching. There's one point when he flat out punches Godzilla straight in the face. It's awesome. He does a lot of biting, and he does a lot of jumping. And he also uses half of the blown up UFO to fight Godzilla. Godzilla blows up all of the UFO. Godzilla mainly uses his fists and his claws, a little bit of his tail, not really, and his atomic breath to fight Orga. Godzilla blows off Orga's head, but it starts to regenerate. Godzilla just goes and beats down on Orga. Orga starts to become a Godzilla clone after eating some Godzilla cells. His skin turns all green. Orga's nearly killed by Godzilla before trying to devour him. Orga's mouth just super wide opens up, and then he goes and starts just eating Godzilla. He starts to develop dorsal fins identical to Godzilla's before Godzilla's dorsal fins start to light up. This crackling sound starts up. This was something that always got me really excited as a kid. And Godzilla just disintegrates Orga. Like, his whole head just starts to melt on top of Godzilla. Godzilla does either the atomic breath or an atomic pulse inside of Orga's mouth. It's unclear which one he does. But a massive explosion that covers a whole block of the city just goes off all at once. Orga's killed. The body just stands there without a head for a little bit before falling over completely dead. Out of the ashes comes Godzilla, who's just killed Orga. He walks over, kills Katagiri. There's this weird line by Shinoda about there's a little Godzilla inside of all of us. That's why he keeps saving the Earth. So I guess Godzilla saved the Earth by destroying Orga, so Godzilla saves the Earth and immediately follows it up by destroying Tokyo. The credits play over the destruction of Tokyo as Godzilla becomes, I guess you could say, an anti-hero. However, the whole movie he's presented as a villain up until that one line when they're just like, yeah, he's our hero, Godzilla, and then he's like literally destroying the city as they speak, so very weird. The human stuff in this movie is not good. It's cheesy, the characters are not memorable at all, in my opinion. They're just dull. They don't do anything for me. Notice how I didn't mention the daughter. Like, I mentioned her, I think, once or twice. I didn't mention the daughter, and she's the main character of this movie. That is how unimportant these characters are. I just left out an entire, like, major subplot of this movie, and you didn't, it didn't even detract from the review. Like, it doesn't matter. She's such an unimportant character. All the characters in this movie are so unimportant. I don't like Shinoda. I don't like any of them. I don't like Katagiri. I already talked about his villain motivations. Don't make any sense. They just come out of nowhere. I just find this movie not to be interesting with the human stuff at all. It's very cheesy as well. Dialogue's not that great. I just don't like it. The kaiju stuff, though, is really good. It's a very big redeeming factor of this movie. However, I don't like Godzilla's design, and I think he is a bit too small in this movie. You know, in the modern day, I don't want Godzilla under 75 meters. He just doesn't look menacing that way. I guess GMK proves me otherwise, but that's one exception. Godzilla generally doesn't look menacing in these new movies because he's so small compared to everything we've built. The effects in this movie are pretty good. There's a lot of great fist fighting, which goes along with the monster stuff. It's really cool to see the way they're using these special effects now that they've kind of perfected suitmation. They can do a lot more with it than they ever could before, and they don't make the suits too bulky to where the actors can't move inside. They really are at their top game in this movie, and they will only continue to get better and better and better until Godzilla Final Wars. Like I said, there's a lot of impressive shots throughout this movie, but there is a lot of bad CGI as well. The music in this movie is not good, in my opinion. I keep saying that because I know I have to keep stressing that point, but a lot of people don't understand that these videos aren't facts. They are just my reviews, my interpretations of the movie, and a lot of people act like I'm just speaking like, oh, these are facts, and if you disagree with me, then you're wrong. Like, I never say that. I don't care if you disagree with me. good for you. If you can find enjoyment in a movie that I can't, good for you. I don't like the music in this movie. It's too slow for me. There's only one good song, which is the intro song that's also used as Godzilla's theme. It's just, that's the one good song that I find in this movie. The rest of them are just really slow and boring. There's no real Godzilla music, there's no music that makes me go, oh, that's Godzilla. The English cut works in some Ifukube here and there, but it's just this, synthesizer Ifukube stuff. It's not, great. I think the next movies will get a lot better with the music. I think the music throughout the rest of the Millennium era is generally pretty good. It does get a little old because they just reuse the same composer who, although I credit Ifukube for doing it, reuses their same scores over and over again to the point where it's iconic, sure, but I'd like some more variety. That does it for this review, guys. Overall, I'm going to give Godzilla 2000, aka Godzilla Millenium, a 7.5 out of 10. It's not that bad. Like I said at the start, I'm kind of neutral on this movie. I do lean more towards dislike than I do like, although there are a lot of things to redeem this movie, at least the way I see it. So, thank you guys all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. See you guys next time. D-Man, out.